Hello and welcome to the Dailies. The U.S. seizure of a Venezuelan oil tanker drew intense global coverage, widely viewed as a sharp escalation in Trump's campaign against Maduro. Outlets highlighted Venezuela's denunciation of piracy and questioned the risks of broader regional fallout. At the same time, international and U.S. media continue to scrutinize Trump's latest comments on Europe, treating them as another sign of his increasingly combative stance towards long-lasting allies. International media framed the U.S. seizure of the Venezuelan oil tanker as a sharp escalation in Washington's pressure campaign against Maduro. Coverage emphasized Venezuela's denunciation of the move as international piracy, underscoring rising geopolitical tensions. Outlets also noted the lack of clarity around the tanker's ownership and Washington's motives. The Guardian delivers a vivid, fast-moving account of the seizure of the oil tanker, framing it, as we said, as a major and probably the sharpest escalation yet of or in President Trump's pressure campaign against the Venezuelan president. Now, blending on-the-ground details as well as official footage, as you can see, and Caracas's furious reaction, the piece effectively captures a crisis edging towards open confrontation, underscoring how military operations, political repression, and diplomatic tension are converging around Venezuela's future. This development comes as the House passes a defense bill directly targeting Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's secrecy over a deadly U.S. boat strike campaign. The Washington Post explains that lawmakers voted to withhold 25% of the Defense Secretary's travel budget until he releases full unedited video, and also all authorizing orders, including footage from the September 2 strike that killed 11 people. The piece also concludes that the move marks Congress's most aggressive push yet for transparency, even as probes continue and the Senate prepares to vote on the measure. Also, in relation to Venezuela, the Wall Street Journal details in its exclusive Maria Corina Machado's dramatic and secretive escape from Venezuela to attend the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony in Oslo. The piece recounts how, wearing a disguise, she slipped through 10 military checkpoints, then crossed rough seas to Curaçao, where a U.S.-linked extradition contractor and a private jet helped her indeed to complete her journey. The report also notes that operation involved secret coordination to avoid U.S. boat strikes and also unfolded as U.S. jets circled nearby. It says her arrival stunned the Nobel Committee and reshapes Venezuela's opposition strategy abroad. Although Machado never made it to the ceremony, she greeted supporters in Oslo hours after her daughter accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in her name. International, European and American media continue to analyze and scrutinize President Trump's latest comments about Europe, framing them as part of a broader pattern rather than an isolated outburst. European outlets emphasize the political and strategic fallout, warning that the remarks deepen mistrust and accelerate calls for greater EU autonomy. U.S. coverage focused on the domestic culture war logic behind Trump's rhetoric, while global media highlighted how his portrayal of a decaying Europe strains long-standing alliances and also unsettles partners who are already navigating multiple security crises. The New York Times argues that Europe's security crisis runs deeper than Trump's insults because Washington is abandoning its role as guarantor, tilting towards Russia and pressuring Kiev to accept a settlement on Moscow's terms. The analysis contends that European leaders face stark choices, raising nearly $200 billion for Ukraine, deciding whether to tap frozen Russian assets despite U.S. resistance, and rebuilding their own defenses by 2029 as budgets tighten and public support wavers. The piece warns that Europe must act or risk strategic irrelevance. Politico examines why Trump's hostility towards Europe has intensified, arguing it stems less from policy disputes and more from a MAGA-driven culture war worldview. The piece quotes expert Jeremy Shapiro, who explains that Trump sees Europe as weak, decadent and overly dependent on U.S. security, which is a perception hardened by advisors like J.D. Vance and others who frame Europe as a liberal stronghold that must be challenged. The piece also highlights how Trump's new national security strategy elevates this antagonism and warns that Europe's conciliatory approach only reinforces Trump's belief that it can be pressured at will. David Ignatius argues in Foreign Policy that a Ukraine peace deal is inching closer despite Trump's harsh rhetoric and pro-Russia tilt in the new national security strategy. Now, the column reveals key elements under negotiations: rapid EU membership for Ukraine, US Article 5-like security guarantees, a Korean-style demilitarized zone as well. The author also talks about possible US control of a nuclear plant, major reconstruction, funding using frozen Russian assets, and also a revived BlackRock-led investment fund. Ignatius warns Trump not to strong-arm Kiev, saying a durable agreement requires credible guarantees, economic incentives, and patience. The Telegraph satirizes the power dynamics surrounding Ukraine in this cartoon. Let's have a look at it first. So this is the cartoon here. It depicts Donald Trump using a pitching machine to barrage Volodymyr Zelensky with baseballs, while Putin, who is the coach, looks on approvingly. The imagery, as you can see, suggests pressure, coercion, and a one-sided game, maybe, in which Zelensky is forced to play ball on Trump's terms. It is indeed a sharp, humorous critique of the tough talk diplomacy dominating their relationship right now. To the Middle East, as the Times of Israel offers a sharp snapshot of why Trump's Gaza peace plan is stalling. It reports that the White House has pushed the announcement or the unveiling of the Board of Peace into early 2026, as Washington still cannot recruit states for an international stabilization force tasked with disarming Hamas. The piece also notes that Ambassador Mike Waltz, his insistence that the force must disarm Hamas by all means necessary, only deepens reluctance abroad. Parallel comments from Khalid Mash'al vowing that Hamas will only store weapons underscore how far phase 2 of the plan is from reality. The Jerusalem Post reported that the Trump administration is weighing unprecedented terrorism-related sanctions against UNRWA. The piece highlights that the discussions have sparked legal and humanitarian concerns within the State Department, giving UNRWA's central role in supporting millions of Palestinians, and also the lack of independently confirmed evidence for Israeli and U.S. allegations linking the agency to Hamas. The report also notes that while political appointed officials push for harsh measures, career diplomats warn sanctions could cripple vital aid operations. Of course, UNRWA denies the accusations, citing multiple independent reviews affirming its neutrality. The Economist presents a compelling re-evaluation of early human technology through new evidence from East Farm, Burnham, where researchers uncovered the oldest known signs of deliberate fire-making, and apparently it dates back 400,000 years. The piece quotes the study, which convincingly argues that Neanderthals were not merely tending natural flames, but creating fire from scratch. And also by pushing intentional fire starting far earlier than the previous 50,000 years benchmark, the report concludes that this discovery significantly reshapes our understanding of prehistoric innovation. And we'll end with the Times, which explores French outrage after historian Jean-Robert Pittet argued that the English, not the French, invented champagne. The piece recounts how Pittet's presentation to champagne growers sparked backlash by crediting a 17th century English merchants with bottling still French wines and adding sugar and using durable English glass. And by that, they were producing the first true sparkling wine. Also, citing early English records that describe brisk and sparkling wines, the piece challenges long-held French belief in Dom Pérignon as champagne's creator, and also highlights how national pride still shapes debates over culinary heritage. That's it for today. Thanks for watching the Dailies, only on Al Arabiya English.